The death of John Kennedy.
Few events in American history have captivated the world's attention and fueled as much controversy as the assassination of John F. Kennedy. The 35th President of the United States, a young, charismatic leader with a vision for a brighter future, was brutally gunned down on November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. His death left the nation in mourning and sent shockwaves across the globe. Even decades later, the circumstances surrounding his assassination remain a topic of intense debate. John F. Kennedy's presidency, though brief, was marked by historic events, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to the Civil Rights Movement. His leadership inspired hope and optimism, making his assassination all the more devastating. The official explanation, provided by the Warren Commission, concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Yet doubts lingered. Countless theories emerged, questioning whether there was a larger conspiracy at play. This video delves deep into the life, presidency, and tragic death of John F. Kennedy. It explores the political climate of the era, the details of that fateful day, the immediate and long-term aftermath, and the numerous theories surrounding his murder. Was it a lone gunman? Or was there a broader plot? What role did Jack Ruby play? And why do so many unanswered questions persist to this day? Through meticulous research and analysis, this video seeks to provide a comprehensive account of the events leading up to and following Kennedy's assassination. While many of the mysteries may never be fully resolved, understanding the context and complexities of that tragic day is essential to grasping its lasting impact on the United States and the world. The rise of John F. Kennedy. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, into one of America's most influential families. The Kennedy family was well known for its wealth, political ambition, and commitment to public service. His father, Joseph P. Kennedy, was a powerful businessman and diplomat, and his mother, Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy, came from a long line of Boston politicians. As a child, John often called Jack was frail and suffered from numerous health issues. Despite his physical struggles, he developed a strong will and an insatiable curiosity for history and politics. He attended Harvard University, where he excelled in academics and became deeply interested in global affairs. His senior thesis on British foreign policy during World War II was later published as a book titled Why England Slept, gaining him early recognition as a political thinker. During World War II, Kennedy served in the U.S. Navy, commanding a patrol torpedo boat in the Pacific. His heroism in rescuing his crew after their boat was sunk by a Japanese destroyer earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. This experience not only solidified his leadership skills but also reinforced his sense of duty to his country. After the war, Kennedy entered politics, winning a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1946. His charm, intelligence, and compelling speeches quickly made him a rising star in the Democratic Party. In 1952, he successfully ran for the U.S. Senate, defeating the popular Republican incumbent Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. During his time in the Senate, Kennedy focused on labor issues, foreign policy, and civil rights. Kennedy's political career took a significant leap forward in 1960 when he announced his candidacy for the presidency. Running against Vice President Richard Nixon, Kennedy faced a tough battle. The televised presidential debates played a crucial role in his victory. His youthful appearance, eloquence, and confident demeanor contrasted sharply with Nixon's tired and haggard look. Kennedy's ability to connect with the American people helped him secure the presidency, making him the youngest person ever elected to the office at the age of 43. Kennedy's presidency began with a sense of optimism and change. His inaugural address, in which he famously urged Americans to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, inspired a new era of civic engagement. His policies focused on economic growth, space exploration, civil rights, and foreign relations, particularly the Cold War tensions with the Soviet Union. However, his administration was not without challenges. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 was a significant setback, But Kennedy rebounded with his handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which was widely praised for preventing nuclear war. Domestically, he faced fierce opposition from segregationists as he pushed for civil rights legislation. Despite these challenges, Kennedy remained a beloved figure. His charisma, vision, and ability to communicate with the public made him one of the most admired presidents in American history. Tragically, his time in office would be cut short before he could fully realize his ambitions. As Kennedy planned his visit to Texas in November 1963, he had no idea that his life was about to be cut tragically short. The trip, meant to rally political support for his re-election campaign, would instead become the setting for one of the most infamous assassinations in history. The world would soon witness a moment that would forever change the course of American history. The political climate of the 1960s were a time of profound change and upheaval in the United States. As John F. Kennedy took office in 1961, the country was facing a series of domestic and international challenges that would define the decade. The Cold War, civil rights struggles, economic fluctuations, and shifting cultural attitudes all played a role in shaping the political landscape of the time. One of the most significant issues of the 1960s was the ongoing Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. The threat of nuclear war loomed large, with both superpowers engaged in an intense arms race. Kennedy's administration had to navigate a precarious balance of power, culminating in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear catastrophe. Domestically, the civil rights movement was gaining momentum. African Americans, led by figures like Martin Luther King Jr., were demanding equal rights, desegregation, and an end to racial discrimination. Kennedy initially approached civil rights cautiously, fearing the loss of support from Southern Democrats, but eventually became a vocal advocate for racial equality. The 1960s also saw the rise of a counterculture movement, with young Americans challenging traditional norms and questioning authority. The fight for gender equality, the push for workers' rights, and opposition to the Vietnam War were all gaining traction, creating a politically charged environment that added to the tensions of the era. Kennedy's presidency was marked by both progress and conflict. His ability to inspire hope and his vision for a more just and peaceful world made him a beacon of change. However, the political climate of the 1960s was one of deep divisions, setting the stage for the tragic events that would unfold in Dallas in November 1963, the trip to Texas. As the year 1963 drew to a close, President John F. Kennedy was preparing for a crucial re-election campaign. Although he remained a popular figure in the eyes of many Americans, his administration faced significant political challenges. A trip to Texas was planned as part of an effort to consolidate Democratic support in a state that was politically divided. Texas was home to a growing conservative movement that opposed many of Kennedy's policies, including civil rights and federal economic programs. Kennedy's visit to Texas was meticulously planned. The idea was to present a united front between different factions within the Democratic Party, particularly between Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, a Texas native, and Texas Governor John Connally. Kennedy's advisors believed that securing Texas in the 1964 election would be essential to his victory. Planning the visit, on November 21, 1963, Kennedy and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy arrived in Texas. The visit was structured as a multi-city tour, including stops in San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, and Dallas. The itinerary featured speeches, parades, and meetings with political and business leaders. It was designed to showcase Kennedy's leadership and emphasize his commitment to economic growth and national unity. In Houston, Kennedy addressed the League of United Latin American Citizens, emphasizing his administration's support for civil rights. In Fort Worth, he spoke at a breakfast meeting, delivering what would become one of his final public speeches. He expressed optimism about America's future, highlighting the country's military strength and technological advancements. Dallas, the fateful stop. The most anticipated and controversial stop on Kennedy's tour was Dallas. The city had a reputation for political hostility. Just a month before, U.S. Ambassador Adlai Stevenson had been assaulted by protesters during a visit. Many in Kennedy's inner circle, including his brother Robert Kennedy, were concerned about his safety in Dallas. However, Kennedy dismissed these worries, insisting on an open-top motorcade through the city to maximize his visibility and connection with the public. On the morning of November 22, Kennedy and his entourage arrived at Love Field in Dallas. They were greeted by enthusiastic crowds, and the First Lady's presence added to the excitement of the occasion. Jacqueline Kennedy, known for her elegance and grace, rarely participated in political trips, making this appearance particularly special. The motorcade route was carefully planned to pass through downtown Dallas before heading to the Trade Mart, where Kennedy was scheduled to give a speech. The route included a sharp turn onto Elm Street, passing through Dealey Plaza decision that would later be scrutinized in countless investigations and conspiracy theories. As the motorcade proceeded, Kennedy waved to the crowds lining the streets. The excitement was palpable, but beneath the surface, an air of unease lingered among security officials. Unbeknownst to them, a gunman was waiting in a nearby building, poised to change the course of history. We'll look at the harrowing moments of November 22, 1963, the shots that rang out in Dealey Plaza, and the chaos that followed. The fateful day, November 22, 1963, November 22, 1963, began like any other day for John F. Kennedy and his entourage, yet it would end as one of the darkest days in American history. The morning was bright and clear in Dallas, Texas, with an air of excitement as people eagerly awaited the arrival of the President and First Lady. Little did they know, history was about to be rewritten. Morning preparations. John F. Kennedy awoke in Fort Worth, Texas, where he had delivered a speech earlier that morning. He and Jacqueline Kennedy prepared for their journey to Dallas, appearing cheerful and well-rested. The First Lady, known for her impeccable style, chose a pink Chanel suit with a matching pillbox Hada choice that would become hauntingly iconic in the hours to come. Before departing, Kennedy addressed a breakfast crowd at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, speaking about the importance of military strength and national unity. Afterward, the presidential party boarded Air Force One for the short flight to Dallas's Love Field. The crowd at the airport greeted them enthusiastically, signaling what seemed to be a successful visit. The motorcade begins. Kennedy's motorcade, consisting of limousines and motorcycles, departed from Love Field at approximately 11:50 a.m. The President and First Lady rode in an open-top Lincoln Continental, accompanied by Texas Governor John Connally and his wife, Nellie Connally. In a car behind them were Secret Service agents, including Clint Hill, who would later play a crucial role in attempting to protect the president. The route was planned to maximize visibility and allow as many Dallas citizens as possible to see the president. Thousands of people lined the streets, waving and cheering as the motorcade passed. Kennedy smiled and waved back, seemingly enjoying the warm welcome. Entering Dealey Plaza. As the motorcade approached Dealey Plaza, the streets narrowed, forcing the cars to slow down. The route took a sharp left turn onto Elm Street, placing the motorcade within direct view of the Texas Schoolbook Depository, a multi-story brick building that housed various office spaces and storage areas. At precisely 12:30 p.m., as the motorcade passed by the grassy knoll and continued down Elm Street, gunshots suddenly rang out. The joyous atmosphere turned into sheer horror as bystanders screamed and ducked for cover. The moment of impact. The first shot reportedly missed the motorcade entirely, hitting a nearby curb. The second bullet struck Kennedy in the upper back, exiting through his throat. Governor Connally, sitting directly in front of Kennedy, was hit next, suffering severe wounds to his chest and wrist. A third and fatal shot struck Kennedy in the head, causing catastrophic damage. The force of the impact caused his head to jerk backward, and Jacqueline Kennedy instinctively reacted, climbing onto the back of the car in a desperate attempt to retrieve a piece of her husband's shattered skull. Secret Service agent Clint Hill ran toward the vehicle, climbing onto the trunk to shield the First Lady. Chaos ensues. As the gunfire ceased, the limousine sped toward Parkland Memorial Hospital, where emergency medical personnel awaited. The crowd at Dealey Plaza was left in shock and disbelief, many still unaware of the severity of the president's injuries. Police officers and bystanders scrambled to understand what had just happened, and many pointed toward the Texas School Book Depository, suspecting the shots had come from that direction. Within minutes, law enforcement officers rushed into the building, searching for a possible gunman. Suspicion quickly fell upon an employee, Lee Harvey Oswald, who had been seen leaving the premises shortly after the shots were fired. Meanwhile, at Parkland Hospital, doctors fought desperately to save Kennedy's life. Despite their efforts, it was clear that his injuries were beyond treatment. At 1:00 p.m., John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. The nation had just lost its 35th president. In the coming hours, the world would struggle to come to terms with the tragedy. The events that followed the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald, the official statements, and the immediate aftermath would shape American history forever. We will talk about the chaos and confusion that immediately followed the assassination. As the nation dealt with the loss of its leader and the search for answers began, the assassination. Shots fired at precisely 12:30 p.m. on November 22, 1963. The unthinkable happened. As President John F. Kennedy's motorcade slowly turned onto Elm Street in Dealey Plaza, the peaceful and celebratory atmosphere was shattered by the sharp crack of gunfire. What was intended to be a day of political unity and public engagement became one of the most shocking moments in American history. The first shot fired was largely unnoticed by the crowd. Some witnesses later recalled hearing what sounded like a firecracker or a motorcycle backfire. The president initially seemed unscathed, and those closest to the scene struggled to comprehend what had just occurred. Eyewitness accounts vary, but many suggest that Kennedy reacted moments later by bringing his hands to his throat. The movement was subtle at first, as if he was trying to speak or clear his airway. He then slumped slightly forward. The second shot. Governor Connally hit. Within seconds of the first shot, another shot rang out. This bullet struck Texas Governor John Connally, who was seated in front of Kennedy in the same limousine. The bullet pierced his back, shattered a rib, punctured his lung, and exited through his chest before striking his wrist and finally embedding in his thigh. Connally grimaced in pain but remained conscious, exclaiming, "Oh no, 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 they are going to kill us all." Nellie Connally, the governor's wife, turned toward her husband and pulled him close, trying to offer protection. Meanwhile, the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, turned to her husband, her face filled with shock and horror as she tried to understand what was happening. The fatal shot. The third shot proved to be the deadliest. This bullet struck Kennedy in the head, causing catastrophic damage. The president's body lurched backward, and Jacqueline Kennedy, in an act of pure instinct, climbed onto the back of the limousine. Secret Service agent Clint Hill rushed forward, leaping onto the vehicle just as the car accelerated toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. For the crowd in Dealey Plaza, there was a moment of stunned silence before panic set in. People screamed, others dropped to the ground, and some pointed toward the Texas School Book Depository, from where the shots had seemingly originated. Bystanders ran for cover, and police officers immediately sprang into action, scanning rooftops and nearby buildings for any sign of a shooter. The response of the Secret Service. The Secret Service agents in the motorcade were momentarily paralyzed by the rapid succession of gunshots. The open-top limousine left Kennedy entirely exposed, making an immediate protective response nearly impossible. Agent Clint Hill, who was riding on the follow-up car, acted quickly, sprinting toward the president's vehicle. He managed to climb onto the trunk just as Jacqueline Kennedy was reaching back. His efforts, however, came too late to prevent the fatal injury. The driver of the presidential limousine, Agent William Greer, instinctively hit the gas and sped toward Parkland Hospital. Other cars in the convoy followed closely behind, while law enforcement officers in the area fanned out in search of the shooter. Immediate reactions in Dealey Plaza. While the motorcade raced away, the scene at Dealey Plaza remained chaotic. Many spectators initially thought the shots had come from the famous grassy knoll, a small hill located to the right of the motorcade's path. Dozens of people rushed toward the area, hoping to catch a glimpse of the suspected gunman. Meanwhile, inside the Texas School Book Depository, employees and visitors scrambled in confusion. Some had heard gunfire from above, while others were unsure of its origin. Within minutes, police officers stormed the building, beginning a systematic search for a suspect. The aftermath begins. By the time the limousine reached Parkland Memorial Hospital, it was clear to those inside that Kennedy's wounds were grave. As doctors and medical staff rushed to his aid, the nation held its breath, waiting for news that would soon confirm its worst fears. We'll examine the immediate chaos that followed the assassination, from the search for the shooter to the frantic attempts to save Kennedy's life. Chaos and confusion. In the moments following the gunshots that shattered the tranquility of Dealey Plaza, chaos erupted. Bystanders screamed, some ran for cover, and others stood frozen in shock. Those who had been recording or photographing the event instinctively turned their attention toward the source of the gunfire, while police officers and security personnel scrambled to respond. The scene at Dealey Plaza. Immediately after the shots rang out, many onlookers pointed toward the Texas Schoolbook Depository, while others were convinced the shots came from the nearby grassy knoll. Witnesses rushed in various directions, with some attempting to reach what they believed was the origin of the gunfire. Conflicting reports only added to the growing confusion. Several men, including law enforcement officers and civilians, sprinted toward the grassy knoll, expecting to find the shooter. Some even claimed to have seen smoke rising from the area, reinforcing the belief that a gunman had been stationed there. Despite their efforts, no one was found in that location, leaving more questions than answers. Meanwhile, inside the Texas Schoolbook Depository, employees and visitors were still trying to process what had just happened. Some had heard gunfire from above, while others were unsure of its exact origin. Within minutes, police officers stormed the building, beginning a systematic search for the shooter. The presidential limousine races to Parkland Hospital. As the crowd at Dealey Plaza descended into chaos, the presidential limousine accelerated toward Parkland Memorial Hospital. Secret Service agent Clint Hill, who had jumped onto the back of the car after the fatal shot, shielded First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy as she cradled her husband's mortally wounded body. Inside the vehicle, Texas Governor John Connally was also suffering from his injuries, but he remained conscious, groaning in pain. Nellie Connally, his wife, attempted to comfort him while glancing in horror at the lifeless form of the president. Agent William Greer, the driver, pushed the car to its maximum speed, weaving through traffic as law enforcement escorted them. Parkland Memorial Hospital, just over 4 miles away, became their only hope. But to those in the limousine, it was already apparent that President Kennedy's wounds were fatal. The first reports of the shooting. As the motorcade raced away, news of the shooting began to spread. Within minutes, local radio stations interrupted their programming with breaking news bulletins. Reports were initially conflicting, with some outlets stating that shots had been fired but the president was unhurt, while others suggested serious injuries. CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite broke into regular programming to provide updates, but at that early stage, details were scarce. The nation listened in shock as reports trickled in, slowly painting a grim picture of what had transpired in Dallas. Police and Secret Service scrambled for answers back at Dealey Plaza. Dallas police officers and Secret Service agents worked frantically to secure the area. The Texas Schoolbook Depository was immediately identified as a possible sniper's nest. Officers entered the building and began an urgent search, floor by floor. On the 6th floor, officers discovered 3 spent shell casings near a window overlooking Elm Street. Nearby, a bolt-action rifle was found tucked between some boxes. This rifle would later be identified as a 6.5mm Carcano, and investigators would eventually trace it back to a man named Lee Harvey Oswald. While police secured the scene, reports began emerging of a suspicious man fleeing the area. Witnesses claimed to have seen a man leaving the Texas Schoolbook Depository shortly after the shooting. This information would soon lead law enforcement on a citywide manhunt. Panic at Parkland Memorial Hospital. At approximately 12:38 p.m., the presidential limousine arrived at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors and nurses rushed to meet the vehicle as Secret Service agents flung open the doors. President Kennedy was immediately placed on a stretcher and rushed into Trauma Room 1. The emergency medical team, led by Dr. Malcolm Perry, quickly assessed the president's condition. It was clear that he had suffered catastrophic head trauma, and despite their best efforts, his injuries were beyond medical intervention. Governor Connally was rushed to another trauma room for urgent surgery, as he was still alive but critically wounded. Meanwhile, in the hospital corridors, panic spread. Secret Service agents, law enforcement officials, and hospital staff worked to control the growing crowd of reporters and concerned citizens who had gathered outside. Jacqueline Kennedy, her pink suit now stained with her husband's blood, remained close to the trauma room, refusing to leave her husband's side. At 1:00 p.m., after exhaustive efforts to resuscitate him, President John F. Kennedy was pronounced dead. The news was not immediately announced to the public, as officials worked to notify Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson and other key figures. The nation in shock. As word of Kennedy's death spread through the hospital and to White House officials, the weight of the tragedy began to set in. The country had just lost its leader, and uncertainty loomed. The next steps would be crucial: securing the succession of power, investigating the assassination, and addressing a grieving nation. We will cover the immediate aftermath of Kennedy's death, the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald, and the transition of power to Lyndon B. Johnson. The immediate aftermath. As news of President John F. Kennedy's assassination spread, the nation found itself in a state of shock and disbelief. What had begun as a day of political outreach in Texas had transformed into one of the darkest moments in American history. The hours following the assassination were marked by grief, confusion, and urgent action as authorities scrambled to secure the country and uncover the truth behind the tragedy. Announcement of Kennedy's death. At Parkland Memorial Hospital, doctors and medical staff worked tirelessly to save the president's life. However, the severity of his wounds left no hope for recovery. At exactly 1:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, President John F. Kennedy was officially pronounced dead. Though officials and medical personnel were aware of the president's death, the news was not immediately shared with the public. Instead, hospital staff, Secret Service agents, and high-ranking government officials worked quickly to manage the situation and inform Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, still in shock, refused to leave her husband's side, whispering words of farewell while gripping his lifeless hand. At 1:38 p.m., White House Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff addressed the media at the hospital, confirming what many had feared. President John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1:00. The nation was in mourning. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson takes the oath of office. With the assassination of a sitting president, the immediate focus turned to the transfer of power. Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson, who had been riding 2 cars behind Kennedy's limousine, was quickly ushered to Air Force One at Dallas's Love Field Airport. The Secret Service deemed it imperative that he leave the city immediately to ensure the continuity of government and avoid any potential threats. Aboard Air Force One, Johnson was accompanied by his wife, Lady Bird Johnson, as well as members of Kennedy's staff. Jacqueline Kennedy, still wearing her blood-stained pink suit, joined them, carrying with her the weight of an unimaginable loss. At 2:39 p.m., Judge Sarah T. Hughes administered the oath of office to Lyndon B. Johnson. Standing solemnly beside him was Jacqueline Kennedy, her eyes hollow with grief. The moment was captured in a now iconic photograph, symbolizing the nation's abrupt transition of leadership in the midst of tragedy. With the oath completed, Air Force One departed for Washington, D.C., carrying both the newly sworn-in president and the body of John F. Kennedy. The arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald. While the nation reeled from the shocking news, law enforcement in Dallas was moving swiftly. Witness reports led police to the Texas School Book Depository, where an abandoned rifle and spent shell casings had been discovered on the 6th floor. The rifle, later identified as a 6.5mm Carcano, was suspected to be the weapon used in the assassination. At around 1:15 p.m., a Dallas police officer, J.D. Tippit, was patrolling Oak Cliff, a quiet neighborhood in Dallas, when he spotted a suspicious man matching the description of the shooter. When Tippit attempted to question him, the suspect pulled out a revolver and shot the officer multiple times before fleeing on foot. Minutes later, at 1:50 p.m., police received a report of a man acting suspiciously inside the Texas Theater, a local movie house. Officers quickly surrounded the building, and upon entering, they found a young man seated in the dark. When confronted, the suspect attempted to resist, but was subdued and arrested. His name est Lee Harvey Oswald. The nation reacts. As Americans tuned in to their televisions and radios, they were met with an overwhelming sense of disbelief. Newscasters, including the legendary Walter Cronkite, fought back tears as they delivered the grim announcement. Schools, businesses, and public institutions came to a halt. Across the country, flags were lowered to half-staff, and people gathered in churches to pray for the nation. Foreign leaders expressed their condolences, and tributes poured in from around the world. John F. Kennedy had been a symbol of hope and progress, and now his life had been tragically cut short. The journey back to Washington. Aboard Air Force One, Jacqueline Kennedy remained beside her husband's casket, refusing to change out of her blood-stained clothing. "Let them see what they've done," she reportedly said when advised to change. Her quiet strength in the face of such profound loss resonated with the nation and became a defining image of the tragedy. The flight back to Washington, D.C. was somber. Upon arrival at Andrews Air Force Base, Kennedy's body was transported to Bethesda Naval Hospital for an autopsy, while the Johnson administration immediately began to take control of the unfolding crisis. We'll talk about the immediate investigation, including the questioning of Lee Harvey Oswald and the efforts to piece together what really happened at Dealey Plaza. The investigation begins. As the nation mourned the loss of its 35th president, law enforcement agencies and government officials moved swiftly to uncover the truth behind the assassination. The hours and days following the tragic event saw a flurry of activity as investigators pieced together evidence, interrogated witnesses, and attempted to determine whether Lee Harvey Oswald had acted alone or if there was a broader conspiracy at play. Oswald's interrogation. Following his arrest at the Texas Theater, Lee Harvey Oswald was taken to the Dallas Police Headquarters for questioning. Over the course of 2 days, Oswald was interrogated multiple times by detectives, Secret Service agents, and the FBI. However, there were no formal recordings or transcripts of these interrogations, leaving much of what was said to speculation. Oswald repeatedly denied any involvement in the assassination, stating, "I'm just a patsy." When confronted with the evidence linking him to the crime, including the rifle found in the Texas Schoolbook Depository and eyewitness accounts, he remained evasive, neither confirming nor refuting his role in the events. The rifle and the ballistics evidence. One of the most critical pieces of evidence in the investigation was the 6.5mm Carcano rifle recovered from the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. Investigators traced the rifle's purchase to Oswald, who had ordered it under an alias, A. Heidel. Additionally, forensic tests matched the bullet fragments found in the presidential limousine to the rifle, further solidifying the case against him. Ballistics experts analyzed the trajectory of the bullets fired during the assassination. The so-called magic bullet theory suggested that a single bullet struck both President Kennedy and Governor Connally, causing multiple injuries. This theory would later become one of the most debated aspects of the case. The Zapruder film. One of the most crucial pieces of visual evidence came from Abraham Zapruder, a Dallas businessman who had captured the assassination on his home movie camera. His 26-second film provided a frame-by-frame account of the shooting, showing the moment Kennedy was struck and the horrific final headshot. Authorities quickly obtained the film, and it was used extensively in the investigation. However, its public release was delayed for years, fueling speculation and conspiracy theories about what it revealed. The Texas Schoolbook Depository, as the Sniper's Nest investigators conducted a thorough examination of the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. Along with Oswald's rifle, they found a sniper's nest stacked boxes, arranged in a way that created a secluded shooting position near a window overlooking Dealey Plaza. Eyewitnesses later reported seeing a man matching Oswald's description in that window just before the shots were fired. Additionally, fingerprint evidence on the rifle and boxes further linked Oswald to the location. Witness testimonies and conflicting reports. As investigators worked to piece together the sequence of events, they faced a challenge: conflicting witness statements. While many witnesses corroborated the official account that shots came from the Texas Schoolbook Depository, others insisted they had heard gunfire from the grassy knoll. Some bystanders ran toward the knoll immediately after the shots, believing a second shooter was stationed there. Law enforcement officers searched the area but found no physical evidence of another gunman. Despite this, the grassy knoll theory remained a focal point for conspiracy theorists in the years to come. The FBI and Secret Service response. In Washington, D.C., the FBI launched its own parallel investigation into the assassination, working closely with the Dallas Police and the Secret Service. The agencies analyzed Oswald's background, connections, and potential motives. One of the most troubling discoveries was Oswald's visit to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City just weeks before the assassination. Intelligence officials feared this could indicate foreign involvement, though no direct evidence of a conspiracy was found. Meanwhile, the Secret Service faced criticism for failing to protect the president. The open-top motorcade, the slow route through Dealey Plaza, and the apparent gaps in security led to scrutiny of the agency's procedures. In the aftermath of the assassination, major changes were made to presidential security protocols. The case against Oswald. As investigators compiled their findings, they built what appeared to be an overwhelming case against Oswald. The key pieces of evidence included the rifle found in the Texas schoolbook depository, purchased under Oswald's alias, the shell casings matching the rifle's ammunition, eyewitness reports placing Oswald at the scene before and after the shooting, Oswald's attempted escape and subsequent killing of Officer J.D. Tippit, his suspicious behavior at the Texas theater, and refusal to cooperate with police. However, before Oswald could stand trial, an unexpected twist would change the course of the investigation. We will discuss the shocking assassination of Lee Harvey Oswald and its implications for the case. The Warren Commission. In the wake of President John F. Kennedy's assassination, the United States government faced immense pressure to conduct a thorough and transparent investigation. The public demanded answers, and concerns about a possible conspiracy grew with each passing day. To address these concerns, newly sworn-in President Lyndon B. Johnson established the Warren Commission on November 29, 1963. Its mission: to investigate the circumstances surrounding Kennedy's death and determine the truth behind the assassination. Formation of the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission was named after its chairman, Chief Justice Earl Warren, and consisted of a panel of distinguished political and legal figures. Chief Justice Earl Warren, Chairman. Senator Richard Russell Jr., D. Georgia. Senator John Sherman Cooper, R. Kentucky. Representative Hale Boggs, D. Louisiana. Representative Gerald Ford, R. Michigan. Later the 38th President of the United States. Allen Dulles, former CIA Director. John J. McCloy, former President of the World Bank. The commission was tasked with evaluating evidence, interviewing witnesses, and compiling a final report that would provide an authoritative account of the events in Dealey Plaza. The investigation spanned 10 months and included testimony from 552 witnesses, thousands of documents, and extensive forensic analysis. The key findings of the Warren Commission. On September 24, 1964, the Warren Commission released an 888-page report summarizing its findings. The conclusions were as follows. 1. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. The commission found no credible evidence of a broader conspiracy involving multiple gunmen, foreign governments, or domestic organizations. R. Oswald fired 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas schoolbook depository. Ballistics tests and forensic analysis concluded that all shots came from the same rifle linked to Oswald. 3. The single bullet theory. One of the most controversial findings was that a single bullet struck both President Kennedy and Governor John Connally, causing multiple injuries before exiting Connally's body. This theory was essential to proving that Oswald acted alone. 4. Jack Ruby acted alone in killing Oswald. The commission determined that nightclub owner Jack Ruby, who murdered Oswald 2 days after the assassination, had no prior connection to Oswald and was not part of a larger plot. 5. No credible foreign involvement. Despite Oswald's known ties to the Soviet Union and Cuba, the commission found no evidence that these governments orchestrated the assassination. Controversies and criticism. Despite its detailed report, the Warren Commission's findings were met with widespread skepticism. Critics questioned several aspects of the investigation. The single bullet theory. Many experts and witnesses found it difficult to believe that a single bullet could inflict so many injuries and still be recovered in relative pristine condition. The grassy knoll theory. Some eyewitnesses insisted they had heard gunfire from the grassy knoll area in Dealey Plaza, yet the commission dismissed these claims without definitive proof. The speed of Oswald's actions. Some questioned whether Oswald, using a bolt-action rifle, could fire 3 shots so quickly, with the accuracy required to strike a moving target. The CIA and FBI's role. The commission relied heavily on information provided by the CIA and FBI, both of which had withheld crucial details about Oswald's past activities, including his visit to the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City. Jack Ruby's motives. The idea that Ruby, a man with known ties to organized crime, killed Oswald purely out of grief for Jacqueline Kennedy raised suspicions about his real motives. Long-term impact of the Warren Report. Although the Warren Commission's report was intended to provide closure, it ultimately had the opposite effect. Instead of quelling conspiracy theories, it fueled more speculation. Critics and researchers continued to investigate alternative theories, leading to later government inquiries such as the House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, in 1976, which concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as the result of a conspiracy. To this day, the Warren Report remains one of the most debated government investigations in American history. Some believe it was a cover-up, while others argue it was a well-intentioned but flawed investigation. The lingering doubts about Kennedy's assassination have inspired countless books, films, and theories, ensuring that the mystery endures decades later. We'll talk about the various theories and conspiracies that have emerged in the wake of the Warren Commission's findings, and why so many Americans still question the official story. Theories and conspiracies. Despite the Warren Commission's conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, skepticism surrounding the official account of John F. Kennedy's assassination has persisted for decades. Numerous theories and alternative explanations have emerged, each attempting to challenge the lone gunman narrative and propose alternative motives, participants, and cover-ups. The multiple gunman theory. 1. Of the most widely debated aspects of the assassination is whether there was more than one shooter. Many witnesses reported hearing gunfire from different directions, particularly from the grassy knoll in Dealey Plaza. Some even claim to have seen smoke or movement in that area, suggesting the presence of an additional gunman. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, formed in the 1970s, re-examined the case and concluded in 1979 that Kennedy was likely assassinated as the result of a conspiracy. The committee cited acoustic evidence from a Dallas police radio recording that suggested at least 4 shots were fired more than Oswald could have managed alone with bolt-action rifle. However, later analysis cast doubt on the reliability of this evidence. The CIA involvement theory. Another widely held belief is that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, played a role in Kennedy's assassination. Some theorists argue that Kennedy's handling of international affairs, particularly his reluctance to escalate tensions with Cuba and the Soviet Union, made him a liability to U.S. intelligence agencies. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, a failed attempt to overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro, created deep animosity between Kennedy and the CIA. The president blamed the agency for misleading him about the invasion's viability and even expressed a desire to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Some believe the agency viewed Kennedy as a threat and orchestrated his assassination to maintain control over U.S. foreign policy. The Mafia connection. Another theory links Kennedy's assassination to organized crime. The Mafia had strong motives to target Kennedy, as his administration had aggressively cracked down on organized crime, largely through the efforts of Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. Some believe that mob leaders, particularly Carlos Marcello, Sam Giancana, and Santo Trafficante Jr., conspired to eliminate Kennedy as payback for his administration's relentless pursuit of their activities. The theory suggests that Lee Harvey Oswald may have been a pawn in a larger mafia scheme, and that Jack Ruby's nightclub owner who killed Oswald was ordered to silence him before he could reveal any details. The Soviet and Cuban connection. Given that Oswald had defected to the Soviet Union in 1959 and later attempted to obtain a Cuban visa, speculation arose that the assassination could have been orchestrated by foreign governments. Kennedy had aggressively confronted both the Soviet Union and Cuba during the Cold War, particularly during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Some theorists suggest that Fidel Castro, fearing another U.S. attempt to overthrow him, may have arranged for Kennedy's assassination as a preemptive strike. However, declassified documents and Soviet archives have provided no definitive evidence supporting this theory. The Secret Service negligence theory. Some theorists argue that the Secret Service played a role in the assassination not as perpetrators, but through gross negligence. The motorcade route through Dealey Plaza exposed the president to multiple vantage points for a potential sniper attack. The decision to use an open-top limousine left Kennedy vulnerable. Security precautions were allegedly loosened on the day of the assassination, raising suspicions about a possible setup. While these facts raise concerns, there is no clear evidence that the Secret Service was involved in a deliberate conspiracy. However, the agency did implement significant changes to presidential security in response to Kennedy's assassination. The mysterious deaths of key witnesses. Over the years, multiple witnesses and figures connected to the assassination have died under mysterious circumstances. Some theorists argue that these deaths indicate a cover-up, suggesting that individuals who knew too much were systematically silenced. Dorothy Kilgallen, a journalist investigating the assassination, died under suspicious circumstances in 1965. David Ferry, a pilot with alleged ties to Oswald, died in 1967, just days before he was set to testify. Several eyewitnesses who reported seeing gunmen on the grassy knoll also died in accidents or under unexplained conditions. While some of these deaths can be attributed to coincidence, they continue to fuel speculation about a broader conspiracy. Public distrust and the legacy of conspiracy theories. Despite the Warren Commission's official findings, public opinion polls consistently show that a majority of Americans believe there was a conspiracy behind Kennedy's assassination. The uncertainty surrounding the case has been exacerbated by classified government documents that remain undisclosed to the public, conflicting witness testimonies, and forensic inconsistencies. Hollywood films and books that promote alternative theories. In 1992, the U.S. Congress passed the JFK Records Act, leading to the release of thousands of previously classified documents related to the assassination. While many of these documents have been made public, others remain sealed, further fueling speculation. Conclusion: the enduring mystery. More than 6 decades later, the assassination of John F. Kennedy remains one of the most mysterious and controversial events in American history. Whether Oswald acted alone or was part of a larger plot is a question that continues to captivate historians, journalists, and conspiracy theorists alike. We'll delve into the life of Lee Harvey Oswald, his potential motives, and whether he was truly the lone assassin or a patsy in a much larger operation. The role of Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald remains one of the most enigmatic and controversial figures in American history. His life, his actions leading up to the assassination, and his ultimate fate leave many questions unanswered. Was he truly the lone gunman, or was he part of a larger conspiracy? We will cover Oswald's history, his political beliefs, his movements leading up to November 22, 1963, and the arguments for and against his involvement in the Kennedy assassination. Oswald's early life. Born on October 18, 1939, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Lee Harvey Oswald had a turbulent childhood. His father died before he was born, leaving his mother, Marguerite Oswald, to raise him and his 2 older brothers. The family moved frequently, and Oswald was described as a lonely and withdrawn child with behavioral issues. By the age of 15, he had become interested in Marxist ideology, influenced by socialist literature and radio broadcasts. His growing political radicalism would shape many of his future actions. Military service and defection to the Soviet Union In 1956, at the age of 17, Oswald enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, where he was trained in marksmanship. His shooting abilities were average, contrary to later claims that he was an expert marksman. While serving, he studied Russian and openly expressed admiration for the Soviet Union, which alarmed some of his fellow Marines. In 1959, Oswald defected to the Soviet Union, renouncing his U.S. citizenship. He lived in Minsk, Belarus, where he married Marina Prusakova, a Russian woman. However, by 1962, disillusioned with Soviet life, Oswald returned to the United States with his wife and their infant daughter. The FBI interviewed him upon his return, but found no immediate cause for concern. Oswald's political activities. Back in the U.S., Oswald became deeply involved in pro-Cuban and Marxist activities. He attempted to infiltrate anti-Castro Cuban groups and even founded a pro-Castro organization in New Orleans called the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. His political activism made him a subject of interest to both the FBI and CIA, yet no action was taken against him. In September 1963, Oswald traveled to Mexico City, where he visited the Cuban and Soviet embassies in an attempt to secure a visa to Cuba. He was reportedly agitated and demanded immediate approval, but his request was denied. His activities in Mexico remain a mystery, as intelligence agencies have never fully disclosed the extent of their surveillance on him. The days leading to the assassination. In October 1963, Oswald secured a job at the Texas Schoolbook Depository in Dallas, which would later serve as the sniper's perch in Kennedy's assassination. His behavior in the weeks leading up to the assassination appeared erratic. He practiced shooting at a rifle range. He had a heated argument with his wife Marina, prompting him to briefly leave their home. He carried a long package to work on the morning of November 22, which he claimed contained curtain rods, later believed to be the rifle used in the assassination. Oswald's actions on November 22, 1963, at 12:30 p.m., as Kennedy's motorcade passed through Dealey Plaza, shots were fired from the 6th floor of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. Witnesses saw a man in the window, and forensic evidence later tied Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano rifle to the bullets that struck Kennedy. Shortly after the shooting, Oswald left the building and took a bus and then a taxi to his boarding house. Approximately 45 minutes later, Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit was shot and killed in the Oak Cliff neighborhood. Witnesses identified Oswald as the shooter. Oswald was later arrested at the Texas Theater, where he attempted to resist before being subdued. During police interrogations, he denied any involvement in Kennedy's assassination, famously stating, "I'm just a patsy." The arguments against Oswald's guilt. Despite the Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acted alone, skeptics point to several inconsistencies and contradictions. Doubt about Oswald's marksmanship. Some experts believe Oswald was not skilled enough to fire 3 accurate shots in such a short time with a bolt-action rifle. Conflicting witness statements. Some bystanders reported hearing shots from the grassy knoll, not just the Texas Schoolbook Depository. Oswald's denial. He insisted he was a scapegoat and claimed to have no involvement. The rushed investigation. Critics argue that Oswald never had a fair trial due to his murder by Jack Ruby, which silenced him before he could testify. Conclusion. Was Oswald the lone assassin? Or was he a pawn in a larger conspiracy? The evidence against him is substantial, yet lingering doubts and unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation. We'll talk about the mysterious role of Jack Ruby, the man who silenced Oswald and added another layer of intrigue to an already complex case. The mystery of Jack Ruby. The shocking murder of Lee Harvey Oswald by Jack Ruby added another layer of intrigue and suspicion to an already complex case. Who was Jack Ruby, and what motivated him to kill Oswald just 2 days after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy? Was he acting on impulse, or was he part of a larger conspiracy to silence Oswald before he could reveal critical information? Who was Jack Ruby? Jack Ruby, born Jacob Leon Rubenstein in 1911, was a Dallas nightclub owner with a checkered past. Known for his fiery temper, Ruby was well connected within the Dallas police force, often befriending officers and offering them free drinks and entertainment at his clubs. Though he had no official ties to organized crime, His associations with criminals and underworld figures led some to believe he was involved in illicit activities. Ruby was also known to be deeply patriotic and adored President Kennedy, which some claim was his sole motivation for killing Oswald. The killing of Lee Harvey Oswald. On November 24, 1963, as Oswald was being transferred from the Dallas Police Headquarters to the county jail, television cameras broadcast the event live to the nation. In a moment that shocked the world, Jack Ruby stepped forward, pulled out a .38 caliber revolver, and shot Oswald in the stomach at point-blank range. Oswald collapsed instantly, grimacing in pain. He was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where Kennedy had been pronounced dead 2 days earlier. Despite efforts to save him, Oswald succumbed to his injuries. The entire sequence unfolded in front of millions of television viewers, leading to widespread speculation that Ruby had silenced Oswald before he could testify about a possible conspiracy. Ruby's arrest and trial. Immediately after the shooting, Ruby was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During his trial, he claimed that he had acted out of grief and rage, unable to bear the thought of Jackie Kennedy having to endure a trial for her husband's killer. Ruby's defense attorneys argued that he had suffered a psychotic break due to intense stress, but the jury convicted him of murder and sentenced him to death. However, in 1966, his conviction was overturned on appeal due to procedural errors, and he was granted a new trial. Jack Ruby's death. Before a second trial could take place, Ruby's health deteriorated. In 1967, he was diagnosed with lung cancer, and he died shortly thereafter. His death prevented any further exploration of his true motives and potential connections to a larger conspiracy. Conspiracy theories about Ruby's motives. Many theories have emerged regarding why Ruby killed Oswald. Some of the most prominent include: 1. Silencing Oswald. Some believe Ruby was instructed to kill Oswald to prevent him from revealing important details about a larger plot. 2. Mafia involvement. Given Ruby's ties to criminal elements, some suspect he was acting on behalf of organized crime, which may have been involved in Kennedy's assassination. 3. CIA and government connections. Others speculate that Ruby was working with U.S. intelligence agencies to eliminate Oswald before he could implicate others. 4. Impulse and patriotism. Ruby himself insisted he acted alone, motivated by his love for Kennedy and his anger toward Oswald. The impact of Ruby's actions. Ruby's murder of Oswald deepened public skepticism regarding the official narrative. By eliminating Oswald, he prevented a trial that could have provided clarity on Kennedy's assassination. This single act intensified speculation that there was more to the story than what the Warren Commission concluded. We will talk about the lasting impact of the Kennedy assassination on America and the world, and how it shaped politics, society, and trust in government. The impact on America and the world. The assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, was more than just the tragic loss of a U.S. president. It was a moment that changed the course of history. His death deeply affected the American psyche, global politics, and trust in government institutions. In the years following the assassination, the world experienced a shift in political, social, and cultural landscapes that can still be felt today. The immediate national reaction. The days following Kennedy's assassination were marked by an outpouring of grief and mourning across the United States. Citizens wept openly, businesses and schools closed, and television stations suspended regular programming to cover the tragedy nonstop. Millions of Americans watched as Kennedy's funeral procession moved through the streets of Washington, D.C. The image of John F. Kennedy Jr. saluting his father's casket became one of the most iconic and heartbreaking moments in American history. For many, Kennedy's assassination represented a loss of innocentia moment when the optimism of the early 1960s was violently shattered. It marked the beginning of an era of political instability, social unrest, and growing distrust in government institutions. Political consequences, and the Johnson administration. With Kennedy's death, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was immediately sworn in as the 36th president aboard Air Force One, with a blood-stained Jacqueline Kennedy standing beside him. Johnson faced immense pressure to provide stability and carry out Kennedy's vision for the country. One of the most significant results of Kennedy's assassination was the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Before his death, Kennedy had introduced landmark civil rights legislation, but it faced strong opposition. Johnson used the nation's grief to push the bill through Congress, ending racial segregation in public places and outlawing employment discrimination. However, Kennedy's death also accelerated American involvement in Vietnam. Many believe that had Kennedy lived, he might have de-escalated the conflict. Under Johnson, the U.S. became more entangled in Vietnam, leading to a divisive and costly war that further eroded public trust in government. Impact on trust in government and media. Kennedy's assassination, followed by the Warren Commission's controversial findings, fueled a deep mistrust in the government. The belief that the truth was being hidden led to decades of conspiracy theories, many of which persist to this day. For the media, Kennedy's death was a turning point in how news was reported. The live television broadcast of the assassination's aftermath, the shooting of Oswald on national television, and the extensive coverage of Kennedy's funeral marked the beginning of modern 24-hour news cycles. Many historians argue that Kennedy's death set the stage for later political scandals, including Watergate, the Iran-Contra affair, and the distrust surrounding the Vietnam War. The assassination planted the seeds of cynicism toward politicians, a sentiment that would only grow stronger in the following decades. The global reaction, Kennedy's assassination, sent shockwaves across the world. He was seen as a symbol of American progress, youth, and hope, and his death was mourned internationally. In Europe, leaders such as British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan and French President Charles de Gaulle expressed their sorrow and concern over America's future. In the Soviet Union, Premier Nikita Khrushchev was reportedly shaken, fearing that Kennedy's successor might take a harder stance against the USSR during the Cold War. In Latin America and Africa, where Kennedy had introduced programs like the Alliance for Progress and the Peace Corps, his assassination was seen as a tragic loss of a leader who genuinely cared about developing nations. Cultural impact and the what if. Question: Kennedy's assassination had a lasting impact on American culture, inspiring books, films, and discussions about what might have been if he had survived. Many wonder, would Kennedy have ended the Vietnam War sooner, preventing the loss of thousands of American lives? Would his vision for civil rights and space exploration have led to even greater achievements? Could he have diffused Cold War tensions, preventing later conflicts, like the Cuban Missile Crisis? This what-if factor continues to fascinate historians, writers, and the general public, making Kennedy's legacy one of promise, unfulfilled. Conclusion: the assassination of John F. Kennedy was one of the defining moments of the 20th century. It altered the course of U.S. history, reshaped global politics, and instilled a lasting skepticism toward government institutions. More than 6 decades later, his life, his death, and the mysteries surrounding his assassination continue to captivate the world. The Kennedy legacy. More than 6 decades after his assassination, John F. Kennedy remains one of the most iconic and admired figures in American history. His presidency, though brief, left an indelible mark on the nation and the world. Kennedy's vision for a more just and progressive America, his efforts in civil rights, space exploration, and international diplomacy, and his charismatic leadership continue to influence modern politics and culture. Kennedy's vision and achievements. Despite serving only 136 days as president, Kennedy's leadership shaped numerous policies and movements that defined the 20th century. 1. The Civil Rights Movement. One of Kennedy's most significant contributions was his support for civil rights. While he initially approached the issue cautiously to avoid alienating Southern Democrats, he eventually became a strong advocate for racial equality. In June 1963, he delivered a historic speech calling for the end of racial segregation and discrimination. He proposed what would become the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was later passed under Lyndon B. Johnson. His administration took legal action against segregation in schools and public institutions. Though Kennedy did not live to see the Civil Rights Act enacted, his leadership laid the groundwork for the sweeping changes that followed. 2. The space race and the moon landing. Kennedy's commitment to space exploration defined America's role in the space race against the Soviet Union. In 1961, he famously declared, "We choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." His administration increased funding for NASA, accelerating the progress of the Apollo program. Though he did not live to see it, his vision culminated in the 1969 moon landing, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. 3. Foreign policy and diplomacy. Kennedy faced immense challenges on the global stage, particularly during the Cold War. He successfully navigated the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, avoiding nuclear war through diplomatic negotiation with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. He launched the Peace Corps, an initiative that sent American volunteers to developing nations to promote education and economic development. His vision for international cooperation and diplomacy helped reshape America's global image. Kennedy's enduring influence. Kennedy's legacy extends beyond policy achievements. His youth, charisma, and eloquence captivated people worldwide. The idealism of his administration and the sense of hope he inspired continue to influence political leaders and movements today. 1. The Kennedy family's political influence. The Kennedy dynasty remained influential in American politics for decades. His brother, Robert F. Kennedy, served as Attorney General and later ran for president before his assassination in 1968. His other brother, Ted Kennedy, became one of the longest-serving and most influential U.S. senators, shaping health care and education policy. His daughter, Caroline Kennedy, has been active in politics and diplomacy, serving as the U.S. ambassador to Japan. 2. JFK's inspiration to future leaders. Many modern political figures have cited Kennedy as a role model, including Bill Clinton, who famously met Kennedy as a young student and later pursued a political career inspired by him; Barack Obama, who often referenced Kennedy's vision of hope and progress; John F. Kennedy Jr., his son, who was seen as a potential political leader before his tragic death in 1999. 3. The what if factor. Kennedy's assassination left unanswered questions about what might have been. Would he have ended the Vietnam War sooner, avoiding years of conflict? Could he have achieved greater progress in civil rights without the need for mass protests? Would his diplomatic approach have led to better US-Soviet relations? These hypothetical scenarios have fueled countless books, films, and debates, keeping Kennedy's mystique alive. Cultural and symbolic legacy. Kennedy's image and words continue to be referenced in popular culture, literature, and film. His inaugural address, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," remains one of the most quoted speeches in history. Numerous films and documentaries, including JFK, 1991, and the Kennedy tapes, explore his life and assassination. His mystique and tragedy, often compared to a modern-day King Arthur, inspired the term Camelot, symbolizing an idealized version of his presidency. The legacy of John F. Kennedy is one of hope, ambition, and tragedy. Though his presidency was cut short, his influence remains profound. His leadership in civil rights, space exploration, and international diplomacy set the stage for many of the advancements that followed. The unanswered questions. Despite the extensive investigations, reports, and decades of analysis, many questions surrounding the assassination of John F. Kennedy remain unresolved. The events of November 22, 1963 continue to spark debate, speculation, and alternative theories. 1. Was Lee Harvey Oswald truly the lone gunman? The Warren Commission concluded that Oswald acted alone, yet a large portion of the American public remains unconvinced. Questions persist about Oswald's marksmanship skills, the trajectory of the bullets, and the possibility of another shooter on the grassy knoll. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, in 1979, concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as the result of a conspiracy based on audio evidence suggesting multiple gunshots. However, this evidence has been debated and remains inconclusive. 2. What was Oswald's true motive? Oswald never had the chance to explain his actions. His personal writings and statements revealed anti-American and Marxist sentiments, but no definitive motive for targeting Kennedy. Did he truly act out of ideology, or was he a scapegoat in a larger plot? Some believe that Oswald was manipulated by a larger organization, whether it be the CIA, the Mafia, or foreign agents. His mysterious trip to Mexico City to visit the Cuban and Soviet embassies before the assassination remains one of the most suspicious and underexplored aspects of the case. 3. Was there a cover-up? One of the strongest arguments for a conspiracy is the alleged cover-up of evidence. Witnesses reported hearing gunshots from multiple directions, yet the Warren Commission dismissed this testimony. Key evidence, including Kennedy's brain, which could have provided crucial forensic insight, went missing from the National Archives. Autopsy inconsistencies suggest possible tampering or misrepresentation of Kennedy's wounds. Secret Service failures in protecting the president raised suspicions that his assassination was facilitated, either intentionally or through gross negligence. 4. Why did Jack Ruby kill Oswald? Jack Ruby's killing of Oswald eliminated the only person who could have provided first-hand testimony about the assassination. Ruby claimed he acted out of anger and grief, but his ties to organized crime have fueled speculation that he was ordered to silence Oswald. Additionally, Ruby himself stated in later interviews that he was part of a larger plot, but was never able to reveal details before his death in 1967. 5. What role did the CIA and FBI play? Documents declassified in recent years have revealed that the CIA and FBI had prior knowledge of Oswald. Oswald was under FBI surveillance due to his pro-Cuban activism, yet no action was taken to prevent his movements. The CIA withheld information from the Warren Commission about its operations in Cuba and anti-Castro plots that Oswald may have been aware of. The relationship between Oswald and U.S. intelligence agencies remains a critical mystery, leading many to believe he was either a patsy or a rogue operative. 6. Why are key assassination documents still classified? The JFK Records Act of 1992 mandated the release of thousands of previously classified documents. However, some files remain sealed for national security reasons. In 2022, the U.S. government released additional documents, but key pieces are still being withheld. What information is so sensitive that it remains classified after more than 60 years? Some speculate that the hidden documents contain evidence of CIA involvement, information about foreign governments' roles, confirmation of a larger conspiracy. 7. Will we ever know the full truth? The assassination of John F. Kennedy remains one of the most investigated and controversial events in American history. Despite government reports, expert analyses, and declassified records, the mystery endures. With the passage of time, key witnesses have died, evidence has disappeared, and memories have faded. Unless new, definitive proof emerges, the Kennedy assassination will continue to be a topic of debate, inspiring books, films, and theories for generations to come. Conclusion: the legacy of John F. Kennedy extends beyond his presidency, is forever linked to his untimely death. His assassination marked a turning point in American history, changing the way people viewed their government, the media, and national security. Whether Oswald acted alone or was part of a larger conspiracy, the fact remains that a young and promising leader was taken too soon. The unanswered questions surrounding his death serve as a reminder that history is often far more complex than the official record suggests. More than 60 years later, the search for the truth continues.